If you watch this later, you will have just missed roughly 12 minutes of class. Sorry about that. The best 12 minutes, too. It's all downhill from here. As a reminder, we quit live streaming class because it's really hard to move the live stream stuff from one room to the other. So we started recording and posting. If you want to see any of these other videos, they're all on the YouTube channel under the How to Read the Bible series. So sorry about that. All right, continuing on. So you've got Psalms that fit in all of these different categories. Who wrote them?
David.
Say it loud.
Everybody.
So authorship is where things get really interesting because we know David was a psalmist. David wrote plenty. But David is not the only one who writes the Psalms that we have in the book of Psalms. Some others are attributed to Solomon. Others? Okay. And sons of Korah. A dude named Herman, which is maybe now my favorite biblical author's name. Herman. He gets one. Herman the Ezraite. Any others? Something like 1/3. No. It's one. What's it work out to? Somewhere between a quarter and a fifth of the Psalms are unattested. No author listed whatsoever. It also becomes very interesting when you start digging a bit past that, because the Hebrew word that we translate of in a psalm of David or of the sons of Korah or of Solomon can mean of, it can mean to, it can mean about, it can be with, it can be in honor of. So even some of the ones that we think we can see authorship of may also be psalms that were written about David or about Solomon. So the answer to who wrote the Psalms is loads of people, which I think adds to the depth of the book, because what we are seeing is experiences that come from the spectrum of life. They're not all just written by a king who has a very particular perspective, right? They come from musicians. They come from priests. They come from the streets. Where common people may end up writing some of the Psalms that we continue to read and sing today. Trying to make sure I stay timeline-wise, because y'all seem so happy that I let you out on time last week that I don't want to mess it up 2 weeks in a row. So I want to give you some examples of what these Psalms look like, and I want to talk a little bit about how we use them or misuse them today. Because I think, as much as I love what the Psalms say to me, that's not always a very good reading of the Psalms. And you've heard me say a lot that I think the Bible is meant to be read as a community. Not that we don't have a responsibility to read ourselves. But we live Scripture out together, right? This isn't really just an individual task moving forward. And so I think the Psalms have, especially the communal Psalms, have an effect on us as people. But I would add that even the individual Psalms end up being read and sung as a community of people, right? They become communal psalms because they mean something to the people. So I'm going to start with a communal psalm of everybody's favorite variety, Lament. Communal psalm of Lament. Like 60-something psalms are lament psalms. We don't do lament well as a culture, do we? We like the jump to hope. And there's some aspects of just modernity that don't like the idea of pain or hurt or death. We try to skip past it. And this is where I could sidestep into like sociology and talk about our avoidance of pain and death and how we quit calling the parlor and it's now the living room and we don't bring bodies home. And that's a whole different rant for a different day. But that says something about us as a people and how we handle pain. There was no separation of pain and death and life in the ancient world. It was all mingled together. So Psalm 44, a communal psalm of lament, is where I want to start. And it's a longer one, so I'm not going to read through the entire thing out loud. But it starts with a recognition of what God has done in the past. So Psalm 44, verse 1, O God, we have heard with our own ears, our ancestors have told us, of all that you did in their day and days long ago. You drove out pagan nations. You gave the land to our ancestors. You crush their enemies and set us free. Like, it's this remembrance of the acts of God before. But like every good lament psalm that starts out with words of hope and God's great deeds in the past, there is a loaded 3-letter word that exists right in the middle of it. And you don't even have to look that hard to know what the word is. It is but. Like every performance review you ever got at work that started out so nice, and then, but, come on. Y'all haven't done that to me yet. We'll see how that goes next time around.
There's time coming.
Yeah, I know. And I shall live the Psalms. But, and then it turns. You have, somebody read verse 9 for me.
You have tossed us aside in dishonor. You no longer lead our armies to battle.
There was a time before when, but. So the memory of victory, of prosperity exists. And in this psalm, they give credit to who for that past? God. They also place the blame on God now, don't they? If you pay attention to lament psalms, there's a mixture of accepting responsibility. There's a mixture of Rule 7, because these are not mine, but I'm going to tell Albert thank you for posting these up for their recovery group, because it turns up 7. There's a mixture of that and also blame, where they point the finger at God and say, where are you now? And it's really interesting if you take psalms like that and read them over the life of the community, whose own ability to follow God was so much a roller coaster. Again, something we should understand well, right? And you can kind of see the cycle where they're turning to God, but things are not great. Anybody read the book of Judges recently? And 40 years, and 20 years, and 7 years, and 40 years. And so here are these people on this journey with God where they're finally making the turn and wondering, okay, God, when are you going to do something? They lament what they've lost. They lament what they are experiencing. And then, most lament psalms make a turn. Or they expect that God can and will do something. Some of them are specific. Some of them are more generic. Psalm 44 ends with the people serving as God's alarm clock. Wake up! Wake up, O Lord. Why do you sleep? Get up. Don't reject us forever. Why do you look the other way? Why do you ignore our suffering and oppression? We collapse in the dust, lying face down. Rise up. Help us. Ransom us because of your unfailing love. Which is just this really lovely juxtaposition, right, of what they're experiencing and what they know God to be. A God of unfailing love is allowing them this painful, miserable experience, and they accuse God of napping on the job. Yeah.
But in our prayers, we never hardly hear that.
No.
They're making complaints to God, and is God big enough to do that?
Yeah. So at some point along the way, we adopted this mentality that is never, ever, 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 ever okay to challenge or question God. And yet, if you read the Bible, what do the people in the Bible do all the time? We're going to flip fleece God. Let's figure this out. Where are you? Wake up. Why are you absent? Why are you've bailed on us? And at the same time, there are other psalms that say the exact opposite, right? Your love endures forever. You never abandon us. You never leave our side. You walk every step of the journey, which is a very different posture than wake up. Yeah.
I like Jonah when he says, God, I knew you were going to do this all the time. Then he gets upset because of a plant.
Which is like a very human experience, right? Like, we can make fun of Jonah all we want, but there are plenty of moments where we get irrationally angry over dumb stuff. Thank you, Jonah, for illustrating. My favorite is Habakkuk. God, do something. All right, here's what I'm doing. God, don't do that. But in the Psalms, and especially in the Lament Psalms, what we get is the first part of those prophetic openings. God, do something. And then they end with hope that God will do something. We also get individual lament psalms. I'm going to keep it moving. I know, Bob.
Okay.
I'm watching my time and trying here. Individual psalms of lament, where it's not a communal experience, but a personal experience. My favorite is Psalm 42, and the reason it's my favorite is not just because I really love the psalm, but it also serves a great point about how we misuse and misread the psalms. Because Psalm 42, if you start reading, you will immediately recognize as one of our songs. Now, I want you to sing the traditional, you don't have to do it out loud, we're not going full joyful noise right here, but you know the tune and the melody, for many of you, actually, you know what, we'll go for it. We're going to sing it. Y'all are going to sing along with me, and we're not singing the whole thing, I'll stop you in the middle. But the traditional, been around for 40 years, As the Deer. As the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs after you. All right, that's good. That sounds nice, doesn't it? As the deer longs for streams of water, so I long for you, God. I thirst for the God, the living God. Where can I go and stand before him? Day and night I have only tears for food, while my enemies continually taunt me, saying, where is this God of yours? Our tune and the psalm match about as well as my daughter's clothes do most days. Fair, dear?
You should check out our ponytail today.
Oh, gosh. Exhibit A will be floating through the auditorium in 30 minutes. And I think that says something about our avoidance of lament, of pain, of hurting, and the recognition that God has anything to do with that. But here's this psalm, one that we've turned into a nice, happy song about how God is with us, that talks about not being able to find God. Where do I go to find you? I'm pretty tired of eating tears. It's not a great way to live. And it continues, my heart is breaking. Why am I so discouraged? Now I'm deeply discouraged. It makes the turn at the end. But each day the Lord pours out his unfailing love upon me, and through each night I sing his songs, praying to the God who gives me life. But then, O God, my rock, I cry, why have you forgotten me? Why must I wander in grief, oppressed by my enemies? Their taunts break my bones, they scoff. Where is this God of yours? It moves back and forth between hope and knowledge that God can rescue and that God is good, and the experience of daily life that is just miserable. Yeah.
I think that's why I like 30, because it starts out with praise, and then it's lament, and then praise, and then it finally finishes with praise.
Yeah, but it's a wrestling match.
It's like life.
Yeah. Well, and I think in a lot of ways, the Psalms mirror, wrestling's a good image. They mirror Jacob's wrestling. Right? Suddenly there's this thing upon you, and you're fighting for your life, trying to figure out which direction is up, with some hope that you'll come out the other side, but the despair that may not happen. And Psalm 42, individual, notice, not communal, but has that experience very much in it. All right, so lament is not the only one. It's the one I like talking most about because I tend to lean the direction we lean away from. I try to find some balance in the middle, but go for it, Bob.
Oh, well, I think we need to understand that when we have the Psalms of complaint or lament, that they always end in thanksgiving and the hope that you mentioned.
But they don't. Psalm 88, friends. Let's go there first. We'll get all the lament out of the way before we do Thanksgiving. I'm just going to provide you a minute to glance through it. Because while the majority of lament psalms make a turn, this one does not.
It doesn't say Herman, it says He-Man.
I was just noticing that.
Sorry, I may have added an R when I wrote it down. He-Man is so much better.
Go ahead.
I love that. I love that that's what we're taking away from this.
I haven't gotten that far yet.
There's no turn. And here's what I want to point out, and we'll do this again because there's another psalm that I think falls into a category that it's not the same, but it builds with this. The Psalms are illustrative of life. And we're not always able to see the other side, are we? There are moments that our despair reaches deep and it doesn't feel like there is going to be a tomorrow. And if you haven't experienced that, awesome. But my guess is you know people who have. And it hits hard. And there's something shallow in the, what's the word? The response by us to people who are hurting to give them the casual, it will all be okay. I don't mind doing that to my child when their toy breaks. It will be okay. But for people who have hit the lowest spot, sometimes what we need to do is hear the lament and sit with it. Am I on here? You know more about this topic than I do.
You don't want to read this when someone's suicidal.
No.
You
You find the hope psalms.
Right.
But not every psalm is a hope psalm. Majority, sure. But Israel leaves room for despair without hope, at least for a time. And I think one of the things that in our rush to avoid, we have forgotten to do is let human beings be human beings for a time. We can call them up later. But sometimes you miss the opportunity to do that by running over their experience in the process. And the people of Israel understood that.
But here, the thing is that in the grief and the hurt that they have, they bring it up to God.
They bring it to God.
Right.
But there's no anticipation in this one, unlike most of the others, that God will do something. And then, to just illustrate that there's room in Israel's prayer book for a whole lot of emotions and experiences. I've said before, and I'll say 100 times probably in the next few weeks, not every passage in the Bible is a go and do likewise passage, right? Not every passage is an instruction for what you should do or how you should act. Some of them just illustrate life, and we get an opportunity to read, experience, and figure out what God has to say to us in that. Psalm 137. You knew it, didn't you? How many of you, before you turn there, know Psalm 137? This will be fitting.
It's in our songbook.
It's not this rough in our songbook.
No.
Like the deer.
Yes. Yes. And this is an important one for the sermon this morning. There are points of connection between what we're about to read and the wisdom of Jeremiah that we'll do in there in Jeremiah 29. But for right now, this is called an imprecatory psalm. It's a big word that means we want people to hurt. And we would love to be the ones to do the hurting, but if we can't make them hurt, we want somebody else to do so. That's the feeling here in this, which is not nice. It's not the nice love as the deer or the songbook version of this, where it starts in Babylon, which is not exactly where the people of Israel want to be. Agreed? Everybody kind of knows that experience. They get deported across like a couple of decades, very often involving like hooks and noses. And Babylonians were not gentle captors. Is the best way to say that. But verse 7 is where it gets hard. Oh Lord, remember what the Edomites did on the day the armies of Babylon captured Jerusalem. Destroy it, they yelled. Level it to the ground. O Babylon, you will be destroyed. Happy is the one who pays you back for what you have done to us. Happy is the one who takes your babies and smashes them against the rocks. So let's discuss the feeling of the people who wrote this psalm. How are they doing in life? You think they're experiencing a little bit of pain and loss? This is a prayer for revenge. This is an acknowledgement of what happened to them. There's a lot of yelling in the direction of other people, those Edomites who were supposed to be their brothers, who stood on the rocks above the road and went, "Yay, tear it down!" And then the Babylonians, who wrecked their town, their people, murdered their families, their children. And here's a people who says, "I can't wait to see the same thing happen to you." Jesus has some words that are different from that hope a little bit. So what do we do with that? Because if you read the Bible where every passage is a go and do likewise passage, then this opens up the doorway for you to hate your enemies and skip over praying for those who persecute you unless that prayer is let them die.
It very much mirrors the codes of the time. Like, what pops in my head is like code of Hammurabi. Like, if you do this, then this will happen.
Yep.
That desire for human repayment if something wrong is done to you.
Oh, it's definitely a product of its time, but it's certainly not limited to that time, is it? We've never done the revenge thing, right?
It's the first thing that we think about sometimes. But then, is it, the WWJD?
Yeah, so the question then is, why do we hold on to this? And I don't have an answer. Please don't see me as like an answer dispenser for everything that exists in the Bible. But I've got an idea that maybe providing the space to say it allows you to work through the process so that you don't pursue it. I think there's some counseling principle in there, but my counseling classes were not nearly as in-depth as yours. So yeah.
I was just going to say, oftentimes I think what we do is that in Scripture we look at everything there's a sense that there should be justice, God's justice present. And oftentimes I think what we do is we mix in our feeling of what justice is and try to use that to justify our feelings.
Yeah.
And actually God, like you say, this gives us the opportunity to express it with the hope that we come to understand what God's justice looked like, not our own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, that's what I think this psalm should allow us to work through some of that. But again, it's a hard one. Yeah.
How important would have this been in different times in history for Jews who have gone through horrible atrocities?
Would you like to do some reading?
Exactly. You know what I mean? Like that. There's a place for it. Like,
Yes.
To commiserate and say they've been there before. I'm not the only one.
Yeah. Yes. And it is very much a communal psalm, right? This is an experience of a people from a moment, but certainly not locked to that moment. And it allows space for anger and for revenge to flow, but not be acted out. Because the psalm doesn't end with, so rebel, take up swords, kill your captors, which is very much how we would think that should go, right? We tend to prefer John Wayne to Jesus when it comes to actions and activities in response to injustice. But Jeremiah is going to give this people some words of wisdom in Jeremiah 29, which we're going to do in the sermon this morning, which is settle down. Live in Babylon. Pursue its growth, its development, which is not what the psalmists want, is it? They want Babylon destroyed. Jeremiah the prophet's going to say, build Babylon. So it provides some space for that frustration and anger to come out. But God's wisdom through the prophet says, okay, now, here's what you do. I kind of like that there's space for that hurt and anger, frustration, revenge to come out in the Psalms, in the Bible, in Israel's prayer book, but then not be acted out. I think there's a lesson in there for us.
And the freedom to be able to express it
Yes.
rather than act upon
Yes.
it. And you can find a lot of examples in the Bible where people tried to get the revenge, and then you see the repercussions that result.
Sure. Well, we could follow that on a different path that I'm not going to right now, but yes.
We all go through struggles,
Yeah.
and we have to work through them. And I think that's what the book of James is talking about in chapter 1, verse 2. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness.
Yeah. And what I would add to that is I appreciate their space for the first reaction to, I don't know if imperfect is the right word, but there's this very human response that isn't that. But the expectation is that the people will get there.
Yes.
The expectation is not that they're going to...
It gives you hope.
Yeah. The expectation is not that they're going to get it right immediately.
Right.
You got to work through some stuff. And we've done that a little bit this year with some of the We Chose Joy testimonies that we've done as a group, and as we talked early in the year, and now kind of circling back to at the end about the opportunities, whether we want to acknowledge them as that or not, to choose joy in hard moments. And I think this is one of those places where over time you see that lived out, but this psalm comes from a moment. Psalms are very often snapshots of moments. And then you have the next moment, and the next moment, and the next moment. Yeah, Craig, did I see your hand?
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Oh, okay.
Really, I am taking so much appreciation of God's word, because it is a bunch of imperfect people kind of moving through what they're trying to do is move toward God in some way or another. And that's really all we're doing too.
Yeah.
A bunch of imperfect people brought together in his church, moving forward to try and do what he wants us to do.
Yeah, and try is an important aspect of that. Like, you have to try. It's not enough, and the goal is not to stay in this moment forever.
No.
Yeah.
I think an important distinction in this too is that they're not asking to do this themselves.
I don't think they would hate the opportunity.
But the song gives the impression that they're not asking to have the opportunity to do this themselves.
Yeah.
They're just looking for the opportunity to celebrate it with someone else.
Yes. Well,
And not that that's still a reflection of the heart.
Yes.
But it shows that their opportunity denied. If it happens by somebody else, we'll celebrate that. But I'm not necessarily looking for the opportunity to do it.
So here's what's really interesting, and the first bell just went. I'm going to actually, I think, let you out a minute or two early today. So thank you. The people are taken into Babylon. I told you in segments, and the Babylonians try and establish leaders back in Jerusalem for those who were left behind, and the people who have been left behind in the land don't love their Babylonian overlords, as you can imagine. And so the first thing they try to do is start murdering them. They begin to attempt to act out what this psalm leans towards. And the response from God through the Babylonians is like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. Everybody's gone. Everybody out of the pool. We're done. So there's opportunity for them to live in the land even after captivity. And their actions in revolt against the Babylonians are the thing that end their occupation of the land. And Kings or Chronicles, 2 Kings or 2 Chronicles, I can't remember which. And I could look, but I'm not going to. Homework assignment for you. The last chapter, and in fact the last few verses. And the land had its Sabbath rest. Only after all of the people are gone, all of it. And it's only in one of the two, but there's this recognition that, okay, we tried that. You had the opportunity to continue living in the land, and it didn't work. You tried what you weren't supposed to try. But what they tried was the hope and heart of Psalm 137, which means what we have to recognize is at the end of these Psalms are moments of decision for us, for the people and for us. What do you do next? What do you do next? What do you do next? All right. Glad you were here. Get out of here before the second bell rings, just so I can say I finished early once.